Good morning, ladies and gentlemen who are joining us in Zoom and watching live on our Facebook page. Welcome to AVI Talk Show. So I'm Siêu Mười Cô, a research associate at Mekong Center for Strategic Study of the Asian Vision Institute, and I'm going to be your moderator of today's talk show. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, recently Japanese Prime Minister Fumio KISHIDA paid an official high-level state visit to the Kingdom of Cambodia. So in this response to the invitation of Samdech Mahasina Pradecho Hun Sen, Prime Minister of Cambodia, this occurrence served as a very significant evidence of the two nations' strong and pleasure relationship. In this regard, AVI Talk Show today has a very great privilege to have His Excellency Dr. Siphana, Chairman of the Board Director of the Asian Vision Institute, as our honorable guest, and Dr. Chheang, President of the Asian Vision Institute, as our guest speaker to join our discussion under the topic of Japanese Prime Minister KISHIDA Fumio visit to Cambodia and prospect of Cambodia-Japan relation. So with that in mind, I would like to kickstart our conversation. Greeting Dr. Siphana and Dr. Chheang. Thank you so much for being here with us. So let's begin our discussion. Dr. Siphana and Dr. Vannarith, from this visit, what can Cambodia gain from the visit and why Cambodia?
Vannarith, you want to start first?
You can start first.
All right. Well, I think for the visit of the Prime Minister of Japan is so meaningful in the context of Cambodia hosting the chairmanship of ASEAN. It's quite a significant visit for him to come at this time, mainly because Cambodia hold this chairmanship of ASEAN. That's number one. It's important to discuss on issue of course, relating to ASEAN, but it's also relating to the issue of global and regional issue like what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Myanmar, for example. And of course, there are many other development topics that are close to heart to the Prime Minister of Japan. And so this is something that we are quite keen to see this major very senior high-level visit from Japan. Yeah.
I think the visit, as Excellency Siphana mentioned, because this is the year that Cambodia is chairing ASEAN. So the reason that Japanese Prime Minister chose to visit Cambodia as the first country in Southeast Asia, that signified a lot with regards to the efforts and the attention of Japan to ASEAN. Second reason is the 30th anniversary of the Japan peacekeeping operation in Cambodia. So this year marks 30th anniversary. So this is very substantial and meaningful in terms of bilateral relation. And interestingly, upon arrival, Prime Minister Kishida visited the tomb of Japanese servicemen, peacekeepers that lost their life when they came to Cambodia for the during the peacekeeping operation. So this is a very remarkable in terms of contribution of Japan to the peace making, peacekeeping, and also peace building process in Cambodia, and also the contribution of Japan with regards to this kind of national reconstruction of Cambodia in the post-conflict situation. So 30 years of peacekeeping anniversary, that is something that is a bridge to connect the heart to heart between the two peoples, to show the sincerity and kind of honesties of Japan toward Cambodia. So this is something meaningful, and by and large, I think the visit, if you look at the joint statement declares very, I think one of the most substantive joint statement. It covers a lot of issues, a lot of areas. It's not only bilateral relation, but also regional and international issues. So perhaps this is the first time that the substance of the joint statement is so comprehensive and so in depth when it comes to this kind of shared position on international issues.
Well, I want to say, Vannarith, the fact that you mentioned the 30th anniversary of the peacekeeping Japan first time, self-defense force, coming to Cambodia to assist Cambodia to get its peace. And this is a very symbolic moment. Bear in mind that, Japan and France are the two main architects of the Paris Peace Accord. And since then, Japan has been on the forefront to help rebuild the Cambodian society from various aspects, from humanitarian, from infrastructure, economic development, so many different things that Japan can claim, that its effort has rebuilt, contribute to the rebuilding of the. We sincerely appreciate Japan's gesture on that front. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Siphana and Dr. Chheang, for your informative answer for this question. So, Dr. wondered, as Japan is one of Cambodia's most important development partner, what are the prioritized area and sector in which the two currently are cooperating, and especially in order to help Cambodia achieve the post-pandemic socio-economic recovery?
Well, as you know, Japan is one of the key development partners since 1990s in terms of official development assistance, and now it's also become one of the key trading partners of Cambodia. And service industry, the investment in this area. And in terms of trade, most of the products that Cambodia export to Japan is mainly related to woods, furnitures, agricultural products, and other kind of also processed food products to Japan. So this is the potential, I think, because Cambodia keep pushing for the FTA, free trade agreement with Japan. So far, Cambodia have FTA with China and South Korea. So if Cambodia can have another FTA with Japan, then it would have boost Cambodia exports to Japan, especially agriculture exports. And of course, it also attract foreign direct investment because trade and investment are interlinked, intertwined. So that is something that we are looking forward to. And of course, we all know that the quality of Japanese investment is very high, because it's when it comes to economic growth, it's not about quantity. We need to also focus on quality, and the quality of Japanese investment, I think it's well known to Cambodians that it's high quality. And when it comes to infrastructure development, ODA, official development assistance, also high quality. So this is the image, this is the brand of Japan. When it comes to quality, it's a brand of Japan, which is something that Japan has earned, and Cambodia recognize this kind of quality development corporations, quality investment from Japan. So that is something that I think quite unique when it comes to Japanese development assistance and economic partnership with Cambodia. Is the word quality here.
Vannarith, don't forget that we also have the regional comprehensive economic partnership, which Cambodia can also benefit from this mega free trade area, in which Japan is one of the country of this free trade agreement. So between this bilateral prospect, we also see this regional prospect that Cambodia can take advantage of it. But I think from the development perspective, one have to bear in mind that it's all boils down to having the necessary infrastructure to capitalize on this trade agreement, right? And for this trip, the Prime Minister of Japan has mentioned quite a bit on the role of the Sihanoukville seaport as one of the, the hub, one of the key player in terms of getting trade out there. So to me, having a good port with the right infrastructure, efficient, modern, will enable Cambodia to capitalize on bilateral and regional free trade agreement. And we have to also appreciate the fact that a few years ago, it was Japan who helped build a bridge. And I'm talking literally, right? The bridge over the Mekong that enable Cambodia to be part, of the regional supply chain. Say, for example, a truck full of a component part from Vietnam can cross Cambodia and don't have to wait for the ferry for hours, can just cross the bridge and then have lunch in Phnom Penh and then onward to Lerm Chambang Airport, seaport development area in Thailand. So these are the sort of contribution that Japan is making, very strategic, approach, right? I mean, having a bridge, well, to most people, what is a bridge? It's just a bridge. But for Japan, this is not just a bridge. It's a bridge that linked, the sub-regional, the Mekong region into one corridor. So I think one have to appreciate this strategic view of Japan when it consider Cambodia as part of this Mekong sub-region new growth pole. Yeah. So this is something I'm quite excited about it, and hopefully with all this infrastructure in place, we can actually, export more. Right?
Thank you, Dr. Siphana and Dr. Chheang for your insightful answer. So I can say that Japan is having Cambodia in terms of many sectors, so as well as building the bridge for the sub-region into one. So Dr. Siphana, I would like to turn back to the current issue happening in ASEAN, which is the political crisis in Myanmar. So do you think Japan could play any significant role in dealing with the issue of Myanmar? And if so, what would it be?
Well, I would say Myanmar is a hot potato, as the expression goes. But for sure, Japan has been a major investor in the Myanmar economy. And of course, it has its stake in there. So it is in its interest to try to find some way to push for political reconciliation, for peace process, for ceasefire, to enable humanitarian work to deliver medicine, vaccine to the Myanmarese people. So yes, for sure. And my understanding is that Japan is quite active to work on this front. Of course, Cambodia also, we as a chair, we have our special envoy, His Excellency Praksakon, who just came back from Myanmar, yesterday, with quite a bit of development there, a lot of result there. But again, it's the issue of Myanmar, it would be a long drawn process. But the main thing is that we have engaged in consultation, we have engaged in sort of like a discussion. And to me, for political reconciliation, it all starts with a political dialogue. And what Japan is doing, what Cambodia, His Excellency Deputy Prime Minister Praksakon is doing, is in fact exactly that, is engaging. Sure, I mean, you cannot expect immediate result, but you got to plant the seed somehow, somewhere, and everyone will have to help water that seed so that eventually it will grow, it will become a tree, it will have a shade, and people can take refuge under the shade. But that's the metaphor that I have. Issue of Myanmar is a long drawn process, and we have to have a strategic patience when we deal with Myanmar. Those who preach for immediate result, I think they will be very disappointed, and we shouldn't be too excited to expect immediate result. But again, we have to have, as I said earlier, strategic patience, to deal with a hot issue like the issue of Myanmar.
Yeah, I just would like to add that Japan and Cambodia have working closely on the issue of Myanmar. I think perhaps Japan is the most important partner of Cambodia as the chair of ASEAN when it comes to engaging Myanmar, because Japanese have different approach toward Myanmar compared with, let's say, the US and the Western approach toward Myanmar, because Japanese understand the culture, Asian culture, politics, engagement, this kind of social knowledge is very important in dealing with this kind of crisis as what's going on in Myanmar. So I think this kind of close coordination between Cambodia as the chair of ASEAN and Japan have produced certain results. And of course, the working not only with the state actor, but also non-state actor, such as the Nippon Foundation, for instance. Mr. Yohei Sasakawa has become instrumental in giving advice, meaningful advice to the Cambodian chair and the special envoy, in particular with regards to the dynamics and different stakeholders and challenges and the gaps and that we need to fill in, and strategic engagement and the step that we need to take. It must be incremental. It must be gradual, because as Dr. Siphana mentioned, this is very complex, and we need to keep engaging, and we need to be patient. We should not expect the result soon. As Prime Minister put this way, we have to. It's kind of planting a tree. So if it's a long term, I don't know how many years it's gonna take to deal with the political crisis in Myanmar. But at the end of the day, it's upon the Myanmar people themselves, because Cambodia has made it clear it's Myanmar-led and Myanmar-owned. So this national ownership is very critical in solving the political crisis.
Thank you, Dr. Siphana and Dr. Chheang. Dr. Chheang just mentioned that Japan understands about the ASEAN culture of politics. So the follow-up question would be, how can Japan, as a regional power, contribute to the peace and prosperity in the region, and specifically in ASEAN as a whole?
I just would like to stress the free and open Indo-Pacific that Japan has launched. Actually, Japan was the first country initiating the free and open Indo-Pacific, and then other countries start to use this term, So the idea is to connect the two oceans, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Oceans, and the proactive contribution to peace. So Japan, the Peaceful Constitution, Article 9, role in the region and the world. So I think under Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Japan tried to play more active role in security and peace. So that is the idea of a free and open Indo-Pacific, and the idea of proactive contribution to peace. So I think we can see over the past few years, Japan quite active in security dimension. And in coming years and decades, I think Japan will be more active. Look at the defense expenditure. Japan, or for the first time, Japan has increased its expenditure in order to enhance its deterrence strategy and defense capabilities. And of course, the visit of a Japanese fleet to Sihanoukville and Ream naval base, a strong engagement of Japan in the security issue in the region. And of course, I think this kind of maritime security cooperation, peacekeeping kind of operation, capacity building, demining, and other traditional and non-traditional security cooperation can be a key pillar of the bilateral relation between the two countries.
Well, we have to be mindful of the historical precedent, right? Japan has been a major player, in the Cambodian peace process. And if you look at around the world where all the peace process took place after the peace process, how many countries have succeeded in building a resilient, sustainable society like Cambodia? We are, 30 years after the peace process, and look where Cambodia is. We are a prime example on how a peace process took place. It not just the actual peace negotiation, the peace process itself. Is about the follow-up of the peace process. It's about the implementation, what happened after the peace process. It's about how to put in place an ecosystem where society can grow, can develop, can nurture itself, and also at the same time to find way to reconcile the difference, right? The case of international tribunal dealing with the Khmer Rouge is a prime example how we reconcile with our past, right? We move on with, of course, we don't forget, but we do forgive, and we're looking for way to reconcile this past. And if you look at the track record of Japan, this is their first major achievement. So they had a lot of experience in dealing with this sort of situation. Myanmar is 30 years after Cambodia, but if they succeed in Cambodia 30 years ago when there was nothing, why can they not succeed this time with Myanmar? So I mean, I'm quite optimistic. I'm quite upbeat on the role of Japan. As Vannarith have said, we live in Asia. We have a certain Asian mentality. We have a certain view of how the approach should be. We're not immediately driven. We want a result now. We at the prejudice of the other aspect. So I think the Japanese approach will bear fruit. It's just a matter of time, because their approach are non-confrontational, and as Vannarith mentioned, it is a Myanmar-led process. And if Japan can support that process, we will eventually see some result. Yeah, I don't believe in imposing sanction. I don't believe in pushing the Myanmar regime against the wall. One need to engage, and this is important. And you cannot obtain a good result when you don't engage those in power. As simple as that. Even our Prime Minister, Samdech Cho Hun Sen, have engaged with the Khmer Rouge, which are criminal. He have engaged, because that's the only way you can bring peace, is to engage with the actor, no matter how bad these actors are. Right. So in the case of Myanmar, they're only terrorists, right? So far, right? I mean, engaging, all parties is definitely the way forward. And I'm pretty sure Japan have its own track to engage with all the party concerned to bring some sense of peace and stability for Myanmar in the future. Yeah.
I just would like to add here with regard to the regional perspective and dimension of it. The joint statement of Cambodia, Japan also touch on several issues from Ukraine to Korean Peninsula to the South China Sea, and Myanmar, of course, is one of the key regional issues that both sides have discussed and reached consensus, share position on. So I just would like to touch on maritime security a bit, because it's quite interesting to see Japan have supported Cambodia in terms of maritime law, UNCLOS. So Japan provided training, capacity building to our diplomats at NIDEA, the National Institute of International Relations of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So this is something that I think it's a way forward in terms of broadening our security cooperation to a maritime capacity building, maritime security issues. So that is perhaps the new area that I think Japan can play in Southeast Asia, in the Mekong region, and so on. It's a capacity building on maritime security and maritime law, because Cambodian capacity, I believe that most of the country in Southeast Asia, when it comes to maritime law, I think our capacity remain limited. So this is something that Japan can do to help Southeast Asian country to build capacity on maritime security, maritime law, because Japan quite consistent in terms of foreign policies based on international law and based on rules. So that is something we can share. ASEAN and Japan is to build a rule-based international order or international order based on international law. So this is something that in the region by upholding the rule-based international order.
Yeah, I think ultimately capacity building is very important for I like to say that for a post-crisis country, Cambodia, we're just 30-year post-crisis, but we're still, I would say, we're still post-crisis mode in a way. So reinforcing the capacity of the government official is very important. And now that Cambodia has become more and more active in the international scene, you know, like for example, last year we were hosting the Asia-Europe Summit. You know, this year we chair ASEAN. We are involved in many different international fora. It's important dignitary, civil servant, that sort of thing, in the area relating to international relation. So I would say the role of Japan is quite important to provide us this sort of hands-on practical experience on how to deal with this sort of international relation. Yeah, so on that note, I concur with Vannarith that Japan can play a big role. And I want to stress, right? I mean, for Japan, the other achievement that Japan have done for Cambodia, it is monumental, is the fact that it helped rebuild our legal system, right? You know, had it not been for Japan, you know, spending nearly a decade to help us rebuild, you know, our legal system, in this case, to bring back the civil code and the code of civil procedure, Cambodia will be, in a way, in a void, a legal void, because without that code of civil procedure, you know, the court would not have any framework, any reference, you know, to provide justice to people. And Japan is one of the countries who have a long-term vision to provide. Can you imagine technical assistance over 10 years to introduce a code? I mean, most of the World Bank would spend 6 months, the ADB would spend another 6 months, but no, Japan is a long-term player. They see that for a country, a post-crisis like Cambodia, we need a system, you know, a way that can lay the pillar of a legal framework in the country. So this is something that reflect, in a way, as I said earlier, it reflects the long-term approach of Japan. Everything is long-term. You know, how many World Bank or UN or ADB have spent more than a year on a technical assistance? Very few, very few. You know, so it's 6 months here, 3 months there. You know, they send a technical assistant there, they barely understand the issue, and here they're providing a draft already, and then the draft end up sitting in the desk because nobody understands what the hell is that draft is all about. No, Japan came in with a 10-year approach to bring a system to Cambodia. A civil code, for example, where the legal concepts are so new, Japan built, you know, with our civil servant and Ministry of Justice, we build a lexicon of Khmer legal terminology, that sort of thing, concept that don't exist in Khmer, for example. And this thing, you got to have a long-term vision. You got to have a long-term patience. If not, you will deliver something that is not applicable to society, because law reflect culture, reflect you know, custom of a country. And the fact that Japan take such a long-term approach, I would say, you know, it will apply similarly to Myanmar, right? Yeah.
Also, thank you, Dr. Siphana and Dr. Chheang for your informative answer related to the issue in Myanmar, as well as the role of Japan in helping dealing with this issue, and as well as Japan as a regional power contribute to peace in the ASEAN as a whole. So, the follow-up question to Dr. Vannarith, for Japan in a capacity as a Cambodian friend. So, I would say, from your perspective, how can Cambodia play a role? How can Japan play a role in supporting the success of Cambodia 2022 ASEAN Chair, and particularly in dealing with the issue and facilitating in solving Myanmar issue?
Well, I think from the start, Japan have instrumental in supporting the Cambodian chairmanship, including providing cars. I don't know whether you have seen the Japanese car, Toyota. I think the brand is Toyota, right? Toyota cars. To the Cambodian chair, and a lot of capacity building support to different stakeholders in Cambodia, consultation, dialogue with both the official and non-official channel and track. So that is very comprehensive engagement and support from Japan to Cambodia to ensure that the chairmanship will be successful, right? And as we all mentioned earlier about the coordination between the two with regard to Myanmar issue, it's very substantial. A lot of work behind the scenes, I think, to support each other on Myanmar issue, and of course, I think when it comes to peace and security issues, as I said earlier, it's about international law. It's about rule-based international order. We need to reject the doctrine that might is right. The powerful decide everything, and the weak state just must suffer what they suffer. So this is not a safe and stable world if we let major powers to dictate all the agenda and interfere into the domestic affairs of other countries. So this is a matter of principle, international law and the UN Charter. And Cambodia and Japan share that principle. And when it comes to ASEAN, Japan-ASEAN relation, we also share that principle, rule-based international order. So that is something that I think contribute to long-term peace and stability in this region. And of course, when it comes to economic dimension, as Dr. Siphana mentioned, globalizations. When the US stepped away from the TPP, Japan took a leadership role and realized the CPTPP, RCEP, Japan tried to engage India. But even though it failed, but Japan did a lot of things to convince India, try to engage India in RCEPs, and in the negotiation process RCEP, Japan also very, very active in convincing other members to be part of this. So because Japan is an island country and Japan cannot survive without regional integration. So that is the basic assumption of the survival of a country. So it needs the region to support the future of Japan. So Japan needs to connect and integrate itself with the whole region. So that's why trade is one of the key mechanisms, because trade is not only economic issue. Trade is also security and strategic issue. If you want to have influence, you need to do more trade. And this is a mistake of the US, that it withdrew from the TPP, withdrew from the regional trade arrangement. And, if you don't have trade, strong trade relation, don't expect to have political and strategic leverage.
Yeah, I think it's quite clear, Vannarith, that the role of Japan in driving the trade liberalization, the multilateralism, it's quite clear. When the US, as a founder of the TPP, pulled out, President Trump took office, and I think a day later he pulled out. It was Japan who took on the leadership to get the rest, to the agreement to ratify. And you're right, in the RCEP, it was Japan who insists that India should remain, and it would leave the door open for India to come back at any time it chose to, when the domestic constituency would, be more favorable. So And Cambodia is already start to see the benefit of this Japanese trade liberalization. You know, we look at Phnom Penh special economic zone. I would say the bulk of it are Japanese company. Aeon Mall, they are building their third mall already. And when you go to Aeon Mall, and I can assure you, what you feel is a feeling of peace, a feeling of modernity, a feeling of security, a feeling of prosperity. And they are building their third mall already. And I think Japan is winning the heart of many Cambodians now in terms of providing this sense of comfort, as I described earlier. You know, in the Poipat area, you know, a special economic zone in the Sihanoukville, in Phnom Penh special economic zone, they're there. And with our new investment law that was just enacted late last year, we will start to see more Japanese company coming in. You know, of course, we cannot hope to displace Thailand as the car manufacturing hub of Southeast Asia, but we can take a good component of the supply chain, you know, so that we can make tire, we can, you know, build the electronic harness, you know, to fit into the car, the final car product. So we are part of the supply chain. And thanks to Japan's vision of the Indo-Pacific, you know, free in Indo-Pacific, that's why we start to see this framework. But we also have to be mindful that we also have the Mekong region aspect also to deal with. We have Japan-Mekong, you know, strategy, and in the Mekong strategy, you know, what I mentioned earlier about the bridge over in Nhat Luang, right? It's part of this Japan-Mekong trade strategy. So I would say Cambodia for the next 10 to 15 years will be part of the Japanese industrial ecosystem, right? And will be part of this Mekong Japan ecosystem. And I am quite certain that more and more, I hate to say this because with the situation in Myanmar where many Japanese companies will have no choice but to pull out for now, they will have to redivert. Some of them will come to Cambodia. But all in all, I would say Cambodia stands to benefit from the free and open Indo-Pacific, from the ASEP, free trade agreement. So all of these are, is a good sign for the prosperity of Cambodia in the next 10 to 15 years. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Siphana and Dr. Chheang, for your personal perspective related to the role of Japan in assisting Cambodia in the upcoming Cambodia 2022 ASEAN Chair. So my next question would be to Dr. Siphana. What is the prospect of the relationship between Cambodia and Japan in the future? And can we expect the relationship to continue being pleasure and touching from the increasing intensification of US-China geopolitical rivalry?
Can you say the last part? I didn't hear well. The last part only.
Okay. So can we expect the relationship to continue being in pleasure and touching from the increasing intensification of the US-China geopolitical rivalry?
Okay. Well, look, I mean, of course, the US-China issue is there. It's going to be there for a while. You know, I don't foresee it diminishing in the short term. But for Cambodia and Japan, the relation will continue to prosper. That's for sure. It's very obvious that the visit of the Prime Minister is a testimony of this commitment to pursue, to nurture this relationship for long term. And you have to bear in mind that, for Cambodia, Japan is a privileged partner. It's a privileged development partner. It's a privileged trade partner. It's a privileged investment partner. Only in the CDC, there's only one country that have placed their technical advisor in the CDC to manage the investment application coming to Cambodia. Right? So that tells you a lot, the attention that the Prime Minister attached to providing the best service to a Japanese investor, right? So I think, you know, in the future, that relationship will continue. And if I dare say that, looking way back to the past history of Cambodia with Japan, there's something that Japan are very mindful, because I met many Japanese ambassadors who are posed in Cambodia, and they all tell me about that long time history, which is so meaningful, so dear to the Japanese population, to the Japanese government. You know what? Is that way back, you know, after the Second World War, right? You know, Cambodia is the only country, and that time that was when King Norodom Sihanouk was, you know, king there. He's the one who decided not to ask for a war reparation from Japan, right? That is a magnanimous gesture from, you know, Cambodian leader, right? And even at that time when Japan was suffering from hunger, you know, Cambodia dispatched rice shipment to Japan. And I think these two humanitarian act is ingrained in the heart of the Japanese leadership, the Japanese people, right? And bearing in mind that Japan is Asian, you know, this feeling of gratitude goes a long way, and it can go for generation. So I will be very, very, you know, I would say touched to see that this feeling will continue on, and it will be the bond that will bring our two countries together. Yeah.
I just would like to add that the foundation of Cambodia-Japan relation is heart-to-heart relations. The people, the foundation of the bilateral relationship. Because as Dr. Siphana mentioned earlier, that Japan has won the heart and trust of Cambodians. If you ask Cambodians to rate which foreign country that Cambodia trusts the most, I believe that they will rate Japan as the most trustworthy, the most reliable country for Cambodia. So that is the fact. And this is the bedrock, kind of a solid foundation of the bilateral relationship. So next year will mark 75th anniversary of Cambodia-Japan relations. And I believe that many activities, practical cooperation initiative will take place next year. And of course, I think COVID will recede substantially next year. So a lot of physical events will take place to further strengthen heart-to-heart relationship between the two countries. And interestingly, this is the first time in the official joint statement that they mention think tanks, Cambodian think tank in the joint statements. And I must say that AVI is proud to be included in the joint statements of the two leaders to promote people-to-people ties, to connect people, to connect knowledge and connect actions between the two countries. So this is something that's significant, and for the private sector, such as think tank, to play more active role in promoting the bilateral relationship between the two countries. So the future, I would say that it will remain a people-centered relationship and strategic partnership, and this is the most sustainable way or means to have sustainable partnership or strong partnership is put people first, people-centric strategic partnership. And this is something that I think very resilient and very sustainable.
You know, when I saw the statement, I was very touched, because, you know, it mentioned AVI, you know, and of the other one is CICP. Yeah, but CICP is very old already, so everybody knows CICP. But AVI as a young think tank, you know, we should be proud that in a delegation of such a high-level delegation, in a discussion of the two prime ministers, they recognize the role of AVI as being that bridge. And this is something that I was very touched. To be honest with you, I'm very pleased, but foremost touched by this recognition, and I'm pretty sure that, we, as the researcher at the AVI, we will have to earn that trust from Japan, to build more relation, to find more activity, to strengthen this bond of friendship between the two countries. So I think we have to be quite innovative on how we reach out to Japan, the think tank, that sort of thing, to have more activity, to promote the bilateral relation between the two countries, among other things. But indeed, it was an honor that AVI is recognized in the statement of the two prime ministers. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Vannarith and Dr. Siphana, for your perspective related to the prospect of the relation between Cambodia and Japan and the expectation of the relation in the future. So I would like to welcome one or two questions from our audience. Like our audience, you can raise your hand and unmute to ask the question directly to our speaker, or you can drop the question in the chat box so that I can ask the question directly to our speaker. Okay. So we got one question to Dr. Chheang. Cambodia usually avoid to mention the South China Sea issue. However, the bilateral joint statement had addressed this issue. What do you think about this issue, and what do you think is Cambodia making adjustment in international relation policy?
Thanks for the question. Concerning the South China Sea issue, I think the joint statement clearly stated the principle of peaceful settlement of the disputes and the principle of international law and negotiation to reach the code of conduct. So that is the Cambodia position. It's ASEAN position, actually. It's ASEAN position. So after years of consulting, having dialogue within ASEAN internally, the 10 member states, ASEAN have come to a joint position on the South China Sea. And this is a centrality of a role of ASEAN. So the dialogue partners are supposed to share the view of ASEAN with regards to the South China Sea. So this year will mark the 20th anniversary of the DOC. And Cambodia, as a chair of ASEAN, wish to see the conclusion of the code of conduct. And of course, it's not in the hands of Cambodia to decide. It's mainly in the hands of the claimant states to decide, because they are the main stakeholders in terms of negotiation on the code of conduct. And it refrains from talking any sovereignty disputes or settlement, because ASEAN is not a court. So when it comes to territorial sovereignty disputes, you need to bring to the Court of Justice, right? International Court of Justice. So that is the kind of the distinction between the peaceful diplomatic settlements of the disputes and the legal dimension of dispute settlements between the member states. So I think Cambodia's position has been consistent with ASEAN since 2012, when at the time in the history of ASEAN, it failed to issue the joint statement, the Prime Minister 40th meeting of the Prime Minister. But Cambodia, working closely with Indonesia at the time, and managed to issue 6-point consensus. And that 6-point consensus is the guiding principle of the following negotiation of the COC and it's kind of political guidelines to maintain peace and stability in the region. So that is a contribution of Cambodia as a chair ASEAN 10 years ago, working together with Indonesian and ASEAN colleagues to come up with 6-point consensus. And this is something that most of the analysts and journalists forgot about, the contribution of Cambodia in the South China Sea, the 6-point statement. So I think we should refer to that. And it's quite substantive in a way. And it's a guiding principle for the following years in terms of negotiation on the COC. So it's nothing new. It is very in line with the ASEAN position on the South China Sea.
Thank you, Dr. Vannarith. Dr. Siphana, do you have something to add on?
I think Vannarith has been quite forceful on this point already. I don't need to add anything yet.
Okay, so turning back to the the third sector, which earlier Dr. Chheang has mentioned that Cambodia is pushing for free trade with Japan in order to strengthen trade tie between both countries. So in this regard, do you perceive that Cambodia-Japan FTA would be a challenge or opportunities for Cambodia as a small state to receive such interest from superpower in the region? And as we know that Cambodia has just involved in FTA with China and South Korea, as well as a regional FTA with it, which is all CEP. So would it be challenges or opportunities for Cambodia to get interest from those FTA?
Well, I would say that, you know, Cambodia have done already with China, and we have just concluded with Korea, and it makes sense that we get with Japan because, you know, in this context, we have the three, what they call the ASEAN +3 country, Japan, Korea, and China. So it makes sense. I think, of course, the challenge is more getting trade people to negotiate. It's just a matter of formality. You know, Cambodia economy is wide open already. Of course, we have to be mindful that there are certain products that are very dear to Japan people. So it's okay, we can skip that. But all in all, you know, our two economy, it's a political will. It's a political will. It's not something that I would be too worried about it. You know, we just have to go through the process and find the time, the moment to negotiate. All in all, it is a very technical work. Yeah.
Do you have something to add on?
Well, I must say that we don't have a legacy trap, Cambodia. We started with very open economy.
Yeah, yeah.
In the 1990s, and we have a joke, nothing to protect.
Yeah,
so open everything.
That's it. That's it. Yeah.
So that is an advantage as a small open economy. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think Vannarith said that we have no legacy, we have no burden, we have no baggage, you know, to worry about. And since we opened our economy when we joined the WTO, we can only see the benefit to our economy. Most of our middle class now are prosperous. You know, you see the life of the Cambodian improving dramatically. You see the young entrepreneur, each one maybe they got one or two products that they can bring in and distribute in Cambodia, that sort of thing. But they all become prosperous as a result of trade, right? So this is something that we have to recognize, that trade matter for Cambodia, trade matter for our economic system, trade matter for the prosperity of our entrepreneurship, of SME. And I would say, you know, we need to continue to remain open. We have to continue to sort of like nurture this trade relation and continue to diversify our market. You know, I would say since we joined the WTO, it's only the last couple of years that we have 2 free trade agreements. We did not have anything since we joined WTO. So now with the trade diversification, of course, as a result of the issue we had with the European Union, the Everything But Arms initiative, we have no choice but to diversify our market. Start with China first, you know, now with Korea, and now why not with Japan and other country in Eurasia for that matter, you know. So the sky's the limit for us. I foresee in the next 10 years, a trade official be busy negotiating trade agreement, small trade agreement with a different country, you know, but it's there. The market is there for us, yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Siphana and Dr. Chheang. So one last question from our audience, from Siphana. He asked that Cambodia has recently grown closer to China. So what are Japan's view about Sino-Cambodia relation?
Yeah, we had to understand the Cambodian foreign policy, objective and interest. First is the diversification and hedging. So it means that definitely Cambodia will not put all the eggs into one basket. It need to diversify, it need to hedge. So remember, 3 years after Cambodia signed comprehensive strategic partnership with China, Cambodia signed strategic partnership with Japan. So Japan is not only a development partner, but also key strategic partner in Cambodia diversification strategy. So that is something that, in relation to the previous question with regard to US-China competition, we need to find a way out from this China-US competition. If we are trapped in US-China competition, our opportunity will be minimized, our space to maneuver will be minimized. So we need to expand the space, strategic space to maneuver as a small state. That's why we need to find alternative. We need to have more choices in our foreign policy. So Japan is one of the key alternatives and key choice to get ourselves out from the trap, US-China competition trap. And of course, the European Union can be another potential partner that Cambodia can hedge on in order to escape from the trap or get out from the US-China trap. And of course, with the condition that Japan need to be independent from the US. If Japan is like the US, then the same camp, then it's still the US-China competition. But we wish to see Japan as an alternative independent actor that Cambodia and other Southeast Asian countries can rely on, because they don't want to choose sides. No country is interested in taking sides. So that is the fact across Southeast Asia. No country, even small country like Brunei, is not interested in taking sides. So that is the fact. And so Japan, Cambodia close relation with China should not be perceived as at the expense of Cambodia relation with Japan or Cambodia relation with any other countries, because Cambodia embraces everyone, open to everyone, and Cambodia is very pragmatic in terms of foreign policy. Anything that can serve Cambodian interest, we will work on it. Black cat or white cat, it doesn't matter, right? As long as it can catch the mice. So that is the shaping philosophy.
Yeah, I think, Vannarith, you are correct. You know, we have a core interest, and our core interest is, as a small country, is to be open for friendship, big or small country, you know, and that's why our foreign policy is very pragmatic. You know, we have a good relationship with, of course, the US may not view as us, but for us, we see the US as a friend. We see, you know, the European Union as a friend. Of course, there's some glitch here and there. It's all right. It's normal. It's like a marriage. There's always some problem here and there. But grosso modo, you know, we see the US as a friend. We see the European Union as a friend. We see Japan as a close friend. And we see China as another close friend. So between all these friends, Cambodia should be able to navigate this friendship relationship. Yeah, so I'm quite optimistic about this prospect. Yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Siphana and Dr. Chheang, for sharing your insightful, both professional and personal perspective on the Cambodia Prime Minister visitation to Cambodia and the prospect of Cambodia-Japan relation. So here we come to an end of ABI Talk Show. I would like to thank both of our speakers and also our audience for spending your time with us today. So if you are looking for more information about our program or other activity, please don't forget to like our Facebook page, Telegram channel, or other social media platform. Well, thank you for joining us today. I hope to see you again in tomorrow talk show, which is about the outcome of first visit of the special envoy of ASEAN Chair 2022 and the future of implication. So please stay safe and have a nice day. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bong. Bye bye, Bong.